I don't have to leave anymore, 'cause what I have's right here. Spend the nights and days before I'm yours now.
Hello dears, and welcome to my show. I'm your friendly neighborhood librarian, reading the stinkers and praising the masterpieces since 2012. Now, a lot of people in my real life know that I'm a voracious reader. The first book that I read when I was 3 all by myself was The Very Hungry Caterpillar by Eric Carle. Growing up, I read everything, from labels on toothpaste, to billboards, to candy wrappers, to cereal boxes. Oh, and books too, I guess. Now, I'm not really into labeling myself, but if you were to call me a reader, I couldn't really argue. But sometimes people have questioned whether I'm a real reader when I'm holding a comic book in my hands. Why? Why do people automatically assume that comic books aren't real books? What constitutes a real book anyway? Hardcovers? Well, hardly, because no one really hassles me about my paperbacks. Is it the length? Well, no one contests that Kafka's novella The Metamorphosis is real literature. How about the fact that it has pictures? Well, last time I checked, J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter series had pictures for every chapter. Roald Dahl's novels are also illustrated. And the weirdest part about it, I don't get these reactions when reading manga. Reading foreign comic books makes me cultured, but reading American comic books turns me from a respectable reader into a fat lazy slob who has terrible taste. Why is that? I've read plenty of comics with fantastic plots, characters, and ideas. They just happen to be presented differently than in novels. There are limitations when it comes to the comic form. For example, you don't get to use your imagination when it comes to settings or characters because there are clear pictures, and you don't get description, and much of the story has to be carried on dialogue. Sure, but on the other hand, it's a meeting of two elements, words and pictures, and it's always interesting to see how it turns out. And today's literature is no exception. Ladies and gentlemen, I bring you Kick-Ass by Mark Millar. Kick-Ass is an 8-volume comic which has been collected into one graphic novel. I will be reviewing the graphic novel, which comprises the entire series so far, although there are plans for more to be released. Alright, let's get started by plowing through the story. Dave Lazowski is a typical teenage boy who dreams of being something. Being a massive fan of superhero comics, he decides to don a wetsuit and ski mask and become a superhero himself. He quickly finds out that the life of a vigilante crime fighter is more than he bargained for. He gets beaten badly without miraculous quick healing. It doesn't help him get the girl, and it takes a while for him to get noticed. Eventually, though, he does get noticed by the crime bosses. Mixed up in this chaos are Red Mist, another superhero who claims to have gotten inspiration to fight crime from Dave, and the mysterious, small but vicious Hit Girl and her partner Big Daddy. When things start getting dangerous, Dave must team up with these characters, who all have goals of their own and are not quite what they seem, to save himself and others. The words are Mark Millar's, and the art is done by John Romita Jr. They make a remarkable team because every picture hits the right note and drives home the emotion or lack thereof in the words. The character designs aren't there to be pretty. They're gritty and realistic. Realistic. Now that's a word I never thought I'd use in relation to a superhero comic. But yes, it struck me throughout my reading how real everything felt. Mark Millar knows how to write teenagers. Let me say that again. Mark Millar, a 42-year-old man, knows how to write teenagers. Teenagers don't even know how to write teenagers. It's hard to capture that crazy bundle of intelligence but immature childishness, crazy hormones, the pettiness, but also the general benevolence toward your fellow man. Teenagers are at the age where they still sort of feel like children, but the world is sort of starting to treat them like adults. But then when they try to assert their adulthood, older people still feel like they can condescend and say things like, "Oh, you're only 15 or 16 or 17 or 18 or 19, what would you know?" Teenagers are cementing who they are. They may be innocent of some things, but they're certainly not stupid. At this point, they can put two and two together. At the same time, there's a lot that they just can't know, that only life experience can teach them. That balance is really hard to write. Mark Millar did it. This book starts in the middle of the action and then does that thing like, "Oh, I'm getting ahead of myself. I should start at the beginning." Hello, dears, and welcome to my show. I'm your friendly neighborhood librarian. It all began when I started my review like that. Not particularly a fan of that device. I feel like it's a cheap way of drawing the audience in without taking the time to set up character and plot. It also tends to ruin the moment when we actually catch up to the part that we started with. And it's just annoying to read a sequence of events that you really don't understand before the real story actually starts. It didn't particularly work here. We start out with him already in costume and being tortured, and then the scene cuts to him being a regular student and introducing himself. I would have preferred if the scene of him being tortured had been taken out and the story had just started with him being an average kid in school. I don't think we really would have missed anything that way. I think it's very appropriate that this is called a graphic novel. Lots of swearing, although with a title like that, it's not really surprising. Also, lots of gore. Detailed gore. When Dave gets mugged, stabbed, and then hit by a car in the space of 2 minutes, man, why don't you just drop an anvil on him too while you're at it? Anyway, he looks about as mangled and bloody as you'd expect. The thugs and mob members that Hit Girl slays are probably the goriest parts. One that sticks out at me is a guy getting his head chopped off horizontally. Like this. It's intense, and not for the weak-stomached. No one has powers in this particular superhero comic. It's also not like other superhero stories in that all the bad guys just happen to come to Gotham, or Metropolis, or Townsville. It's addressed that Dave's efforts can only reach so far, and so it's heartening when his efforts make a sort of superhero movement and people around the world start standing up to crime, because there really is only so much one guy can do. All the main characters are memorable. There is a half-hearted attempt at a supporting cast, but honestly it fails on that level. The bad guys are just that. Acceptable killing targets and totally one-dimensional. The first time Dave sees a bunch of mob members slaughtered, it does faze him a bit, but he gets over it pretty quick. As far as supporting characters go on the good side, there's Dave's dad, Dave's crush Katie, and Dave's two disposable friends. What's-his-face and other what's-his-face. This is a flaw, but it doesn't bring the story down too much. What it boils down to is that the main characters have the responsibility of carrying the entire story. Now, are they up to such a task? Well, kind of. Mindy, or Hit Girl, is the fan favorite, and I can definitely see why. She easily has the best line, she's the most competent, she has the most poignant story arc, and she's witty and smart. Plus, she's only 10. She defies all expectations in the best possible ways. She steals every scene she's in. She's an efficient killer, but not stone cold. It turns out that she's been living a lie based on her father's fantasies, but she doesn't harbor any bitterness towards him. There are definitely layers to her, and they are explored well. I wish I could say the other characters did it for me, but honestly, they didn't. Dave is, yes, a realistic teenage boy, but there isn't anything spectacular about him that makes him stand out as a character. He isn't particularly charismatic or outrageously intelligent or outrageously unintelligent. I know that's the point. He's meant to be unremarkable, but that translates into a character without even hidden depths. He's jerked around by the plot rather than being an active participant in his own destiny. What makes it even sadder is that he seems to be living proof of Murphy's Law.
That's me, Joseph Murphy.
No, what?
And that's Murphy's Law. Murphy's Law states that everything that can go wrong will go wrong, and nobody knows that better than me.
The biggest example that I can remember is throughout the course of the story, he gets closer and closer to his crush, Katie, by pretending to be gay. Near the end of the story, he confesses his love to Katie and apologizes for the lie. Her response? To be furious, ask her new boyfriend to beat Dave up, and then later on send Dave pictures of her, shall we say, pleasuring her new boyfriend. I mean, geez, how vindictive can you get? Big Daddy, the superhero alias that Mindy's father goes by, is basically mysterious, which should make him intriguing, but doesn't when he's paired with the much stronger character of Mindy. The most interesting thing about him is his true origin, which isn't revealed until near the end. He's told his daughter that he was an ex-cop, swearing revenge on the mob after they killed her mother. But, spoiler alert, he was actually an accountant who was bored and dissatisfied with his life, so he decided to indulge in comic book adventures. The only reason that he's going after the mob is because he needed a villain to fulfill his fantasies. It's a really interesting comparison to our main character, Dave. Big Daddy is an interesting character in retrospect, but throughout the story, he fell flat. This is a very original story, even within the superhero genre, so it's really a shame that it felt like it needed to resort to one-dimensional archetypes and characters that had serious potential. Red Mist is a character who is hard to talk about without giving away spoilers. Suffice it to say that he is an integral part of a twist near the end of the story. The twist is very well done, and I didn't see it coming, but Red Mist is not a very well-developed character. I'm mixed about my feelings about this because part of the reason the twist worked so well is because we didn't know Red Mist very well. But the characters' feelings about each other didn't make any sense because of the lack of development. Character interactions in general suffer. We're led to believe that Dave loves Katie, but why? All we ever see of her is her being either nasty or clueless. Dave pretty much ignores his friends, so how did they even become friends in the first place, and why should the audience care? We're told that Dave and Red Mist become best friends, but there is no basis for that friendship. The comic does approach the satirical sometimes, citing realistic reactions to a guy dressed up in a full bodysuit. People mistake Dave as a pervert, villains double over laughing. There are references to other comics as well. The biggest one is when Red Mist quotes Jack Nicholson's Joker at the end as the closing line of the 8th comic.
Wait till they get a load of me.
It was nice to see homage to all the comics that basically inspired this one, but it never descended into shameless fan pandering or plagiarism. This book completes a story, but is left open for sequels, and I hear sequels are in the works. Kick-Ass the movie was released in 2010 to moderate box office and critical reception. It's a fun action movie. The constant narration that works in a comic gets annoying quick in a feature-length film. And oh boy, that product placement. That Apple product placement. I see what you did there, Apple. All the convenient shots of the back of his laptop are really that necessary to progress the story, huh? Huh? I recognize your attempts to indoctrinate me. You're as good as saying, see, Dave is a Mac. Don't you want to be a superhero like Dave? Well, all you've got to do is give us $1,000 and your soul and be our mind slave for all time, and you can be cool just like Dave. What do you say? Look, Apple, I love you as much as the next guy, but no one thinks product placement is classy. No one. You know better. Stop that. There's some substance where the comics also had substance, mainly the relationship between Hit Girl and her father, but it's mostly just a comic book movie, and it embraces that. There's nothing wrong with that. It's fairly faithful to the source material, but has some major changes. The twist that worked so well in the comic is not a twist in the movie. It instead becomes a case of dramatic irony in that the audience knows things that the characters do not. This approach totally derailed the tension. There were good performances, but there was also hammy overacting! Not just in the villains, but in characters who are supposed to be subtle. Big Daddy's origin is more cut and dry in the movie, and that worked against it because it took away some struggle that Big Daddy and Hit Girl would have to work through as characters. The gore is still there, but toned down for the movie. I'm not sure why, because it had an R rating already, so why not go all out, right? But I think the gore in the movie would be more palatable to a weak constitution than the illustrations in the book. There are some moments that are changed to be more Hollywood-friendly, and this takes away from some of the gritty realism in the book. There's an added scene between Big Daddy and Hit Girl that gives them an understanding and closure that they didn't get originally. Also, Dave gets the girl, and we actually get to see her more. Yes, he gets Alex from Nikita, totally out of his league. But anyway, I say yay to the development of Katie's character, but nay to him getting her and having his Hollywood happy ending. Dave's dad gets even less of a role in the movie than he did in the comic, which is sad because a loving father having to deal with a son who is suddenly frequently bruised and bleeding was an awesome angle to take in a superhero film. What's-his-face and What's-his-face are in the movie more than they were in the book, but I still can't remember their names. The editing sometimes got to the point where I couldn't see the fight choreography, which was annoying, and the fighting wasn't really spectacular for a movie that has so much of it. The final fight really shines, though, and I wonder if they were holding back until that scene. Near the end of the movie, Dave gets a jetpack, and machine guns some bad guys, as well as decks the big bad with a bazooka. But I couldn't help but wonder if there was any struggle at all for Dave murdering people. His character didn't seem to add up by the end of the movie. The movie started to drag its feet near the end. It seemed to reach a good stopping point and then keep going, and then reach another good stopping point and then keep going. There were about 5 fake-out endings, and by the end I got pretty bored. The effects were nice, there were definitely cool fight moments when they could be seen, and it's an enjoyable enough movie. Not really stunningly good, but definitely not bad. Average, like its main character. Would I recommend the graphic novel? Skip it. It isn't bad by any means, but there are way better comics to spend your time and money on. The occasional parody of the superhero genre is clever, but none of the ideas are really innovative. The characters either aren't memorable or don't mesh well with other characters. The cast is a mess of non-developed or half-developed ideas. I can't see Dave Lazowski becoming iconic like Peter Parker, Clark Kent, or Bruce Wayne. To be honest, I've never read a story quite like this, but I feel like it could be executed better. I've got no complaints as far as the artwork goes. I find the gritty style appropriate and aesthetically pleasing. But the story could bear improvement. I'm glad I read it, and I had a good time while reading it, but I don't think it's worth buying. Maybe check it out at the library if you see it there. That's what I did, and to be honest, I'm glad of it. I really can't award Kick-Ass more than 2 stars out of 5, and mainly that's for the art and the good intentions. Better luck next time, Mark Millar. Would I recommend the movie? Sure, if you're in the mood for mindless fun. I cannot stress this enough. You will be disappointed if you go into this movie expecting a masterpiece. I really don't think a movie with this title will foster expectations like that, but you never know. Like I said, it's just an average movie, and sometimes that's all you need. It won't make you think, and you won't leave the theater thinking it's the greatest superhero movie you've ever seen, and probably it will remind you of better superhero movies and make you wish you were watching them. But for what it is, I think it's just about on par with its source material, so I'll leave the movie with a score of 2 stars out of 5. And there it is, my first comic reviewed. And before that it was my first monologue. And before that, my first fan fiction. You know what? Why interrupt this stream of firsts? Next time, I'm going to review my first fairy tale, The Little Mermaid, by Hans Christian Andersen. Till next time, I'm your friendly neighborhood librarian, signing off.
There is a world that is virtual and different.